In our last conspiracy episode, we looked at the CIA's mind control program MKUltra, a wild conspiracy theory that turned out to be true. Well, this time, I've got 4 more for you. Buckle up, this one's wild. Are you ready for some more true conspiracy theories? Let's get weird.
The history of mankind is riddled with the weird and the wonderful. Bizarre people, strange places, and odd events. For centuries, we've told each other fantastic stories around campfires and in darkened rooms. Tales of ghosts, UFOs, and conspiracies. But are these stories exactly that? Stories? There's only one way to find out. Dive into the rabbit hole and enter Marc W. Shako's Weird World.
Hello and welcome to Marc W. Shako's Weird World, and today I bring you conspiracy theories. But not the mad, Princess Diana never landed on the moon type. No, dear listener, these ones just so happen to be true. Before we get to all of that though, we should take a quick look at the term conspiracy theory itself. Where did that come from? Well, before we get to that, we should look at something else. And that is how language can affect perception. The words we use do more than allow us to communicate, they can actually affect how we think. Now before you write that off as complete bollocks, consider this. There will be words in one language that have no translation in another. As a Brit, one easy example for me is how many different words, terms and phrases we have to describe rain. Drizzle, spitting, pissing down, cats and dogs. Nobody says that one anymore, but think about it. If you were to sit for 5 minutes, you'd be able to come up with loads. How many of those terms do you think they use somewhere like North Africa? You try talking to a Moroccan about that fine stuff that soaks you through, see where that gets you. But it's not just us Brits. The Inuit language has multiple terms for snow. Here in the UK, it snows 1 day a year and everything stops. But the Inuits' many terms for snow has actually been linked to their ability to distinguish between different types of snow. So, whereas we just say snow, they might be able to say which type of snow they're looking at, while we just shrug. Here's another example. Speakers of Mongolian languages have actually been found faster at discriminating colours, such as a dark brownish red, from other similar dark brownish reds, and a light yellow-brown colour. These are kinka and huhe, respectively. Say them. Enjoy them. The implication being perception is influenced not only by biological factors but also linguistic ones. Want another example? Try this on for size. Some languages have different genders for stuff. Just 2 though. Probably a coincidence. Anyway, grammatical gender, similar to those found in languages like Spanish and German, can actually affect how people perceive and categorize objects. That sounds mad, but just as an example, in German, the word for bridge is feminine. When asking a German to describe a bridge, they're more likely to use traditionally feminine traits. Delicate and fragile. Yet another example researchers found is that speakers of languages with more pronounced gender distinctions have a tendency to hold stronger gender stereotypes and have more rigid gender roles. Now this example is quickly becoming a 2025 inclusivity nightmare, so if you are offended, switch off now. Absolutely nobody cares. There are more examples. One group of Aboriginal Australians in Queensland have a unique compass-based system for giving directions. So instead of using relative speaker-centric directions like left, right, forward, backward, their language uses cardinal directions, north, south, east, west, to describe locations and movements. Guess who's better at instantly telling you which way north is? well, it's them. So the fact is, while language doesn't determine perception, it can certainly shape it. Think now about some of the biases you might have towards certain words. Moist, for example, you might have just thrown up in your mouth a little bit. There will be words you hear or read and instantly a positive or negative thought will follow. You see, some clever folks realise this connection between perception and language. Those clever people were the CIA. After the assassination of JFK, they discovered to their horror that not everyone was buying the official narrative that they were selling. But if the citizenry doubted the official story, there could be dire consequences. This must be stopped. So, the CIA came up with a term to discredit those ideas which did not line up with the official story, and the phrase conspiracy theory was born. Nowadays, a lot of people hear the term conspiracy theory and instantly connect it to nonsense. They instantly think of flat earth and lizard people. That, of course, was the whole idea. Another episode we might take a little bit more time to look at the more modern similar terms to conspiracy theory like misinformation and debunked, and how they're used to shape the thinking of the zeitgeist, but for now, we'll move along, and I'll just let you stew on that one for yourself. Give yourself bonus points if you can name 5. So, to prove that not all conspiracy theories are automatically false, here's 5 examples of what were thought at the time to be conspiracy theories that turned out to be absolutely true. Coming in at number 5 is an easy one. It is, of course, MK Ultra. The CIA's mind control program was the topic of episode 3, so I will not go into it here, except to say it's more horrendous than you can probably imagine. Go and hunt that episode down if you've missed it. Coming in at number 4, and staying on the theme of controlling the perception of the masses, it's Operation Mockingbird. Operation Mockingbird was, or should that be is, the CIA's secret campaign to influence American culture via the media. This one was confirmed through declassified documents, and just in case you're one of those pain-in-the-arse types who refuses to believe anything, also from testimony from former agents of the CIA. themselves. Actually, what is fucking hilarious about this one, despite declassified documents and testimony from former CIA agents, Wikipedia refers to this one as alleged. And in August of 2024, ABC News went one step further and called it utterly unsubstantiated. Listen to the end of this one and make of that what you will. In 1975, Senator Frank Church established a committee to investigate government operations and potential abuses. Those abuses included the CIA's involvement in journalism. The Church Committee's findings revealed that the agency had bribed students and established journalists to write Langley-approved versions of events. Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist Carl Bernstein built upon the Church Committee's report in 1977. In an article published in Rolling Stone magazine, he gave more details about the CIA's manipulation of the media. Bernstein's expose shed light on the agency's activities, which I'm sure they were delighted about. So, where did it all start? If language can influence the way we see things, imagine what the media could do. That's what CIA boffins thought, so they decided to seed stories and infiltrate news organizations. By the 1950s, there were as many as 3,000 CIA employees and dozens of large global media outlets working to maintain a complex propaganda machine. By the Church Committee's calculations, misinforming the world cost American taxpayers over $250 million a year. Frank Wisner is often regarded as the mastermind behind Operation Mockingbird, and he came up with the term Mighty Wurlitzer. Wurlitzer made jukeboxes and organs. The term described Langley's ability to play the media as an instrument. How? A network of journalists and publications that included newspapers and broadcasters. Major ones. The CIA would provide pre-written stories designed to support US policy objectives to sympathetic journalists. They influenced the editorial policies of news organizations by maintaining close relationships with editors and media executives. Another ploy was actually recruiting journalists. In exchange for their cooperation, they'd be offered exclusive stories and access. The CIA also suppressed stories, preventing the publication of news items deemed detrimental to US interests. When you think that the idea behind the media is to keep power in check on behalf of the citizenry, this one leaves a really bad taste in the mouth. And when you hear all of that, it does kind of make a mockery of ABC's position. Anyway, moving on to number 3, and this one's really bad. To give you an idea of just how awful this next one is, I'll give the experiment its full name. The Tuskegee study of untreated syphilis in the Negro male. Fuck me. For years, rumours circulated that the US government secretly performed medical experiments on black men in Macon County, Alabama. The rumours sadly were true. This experiment was set up to study the natural progression of syphilis without treatment. In 1972, the cat was let out of the bag. It was revealed that the publicly funded Public Health Service had deliberately failed to treat syphilis in more than 600 African American men. Those behind this atrocity intentionally withheld treatment from not dozens but hundreds of African American men with syphilis in order to study its long-term effects. In 1940, just 8 years into this experiment, clinical trials first demonstrated penicillin's efficacy against syphilis, showcasing its ability to cure early-stage infections. 5 years later, the World Health Organization and CDC began recommending penicillin as the standard treatment for syphilis. The study went on for 4 decades. That's right. For a quarter of a century after a cure was found, the patients were given disguised placebos. And it gets worse because of course it fucking does. The treatments they were given included arsenic-based compounds and mercurial ointments. And if you weren't paying attention in school, arsenic and mercury are, just checking, yeah, they're bad. Then it gets worse again. Scientists actively prevented participants from receiving syphilis treatment programs readily available to other residents in the area, to maintain the integrity of the experiment. Other treatments included spinal taps. To make sure the patient showed up for the spinal taps, doctors sent participants a misleading letter titled, "Last Chance for Special Free Treatment." After funding for Tuskegee was lost, the study was continued without informing the men that they would never be treated. The study continued, in fact, under a string of different public health service supervisors until 1972. It took a leak to the press to result in the program's termination on November the 16th of the same year. Just like MKUltra, you have to wonder how long they'd have carried on without that intervention. By the time the word was out, of course, the damage was done, and the numbers make for depressing reading. 28 of the patients had died directly from syphilis. 100 lost their lives from syphilis-related complications, which sounds just dreadful. But it wasn't just the unwitting participants who suffered. 40 of their wives were infected with syphilis, and 19 children were born with congenital syphilis. In 1974, a class action lawsuit was settled out of court. The surviving participants received multi-million-dollar settlements and lifetime health benefits. In 1997, Bill Clinton officially apologized. Number 2 on the list, these aren't in any order by the way, is the Counterintelligence Program, or COINTELPRO to its friends. This was a secret FBI program between 1956 and 1971 designed to disrupt and discredit political dissidents and civil rights organizations. Feds pretending to be members of a group with whom they have no affiliation for the purposes of discrediting them. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm sure glad that ended in the 70s. At its inception, the program's main target was the Communist Party, obviously just for the purpose of protecting national security, preventing violence, and maintaining the existing social and political order. As time went on and the anti-establishment 60s rolled around, the feds were getting a taste for abusing power, so decided to crack on until the 70s. Who did they target? There's quite a list. In one breath it goes like this. Feminist organizations, the Communist Party USA, anti-Vietnam War organizers, activists in the civil rights and black power movements, environmentalist and animal rights organizations, the American Indian movement, and Mexican-American groups like the Brown Berets and the United Farm Workers. This next bit is off Wikipedia. Beginning in 1969, leaders of the Black Panther Party were targeted by the COINTELPRO and neutralized by being assassinated, imprisoned, publicly humiliated, or falsely charged with crimes. Sounds a bit like what happens to those opposed to the establishment today, doesn't it? No? Julian Assange says yes. Probably. Anyway, Bobby Kennedy, Attorney General at the time, personally authorized some of the programs. One of those programs included written approval for limited wiretapping of Martin Luther King's phones. What were the limits? Apparently, it was on a trial basis for a month or so. Luckily, FBI boss J. Edgar Hoover, who was suspicious of people being judged on the content of their character, extended the clearance so his men were unshackled to dig up evidence in any areas of King's life they deemed worthy. That's Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who died on the 4th of April 1968 by assassination. While I'm not saying his death was a result of COINTELPRO, I'm not saying it wasn't either, but that's probably something we should look into in a future episode. While the program was mostly focused on the broader anti-establishment New Left, they also targeted white supremacist groups such as the Ku Klux Klan and the National States' Rights Party. According to FBI records, the bulk of the program's resources went towards marginalizing, infiltrating and disrupting groups. Their methods included, and see if any of these sound familiar to you through a modern lens, from Wikipedia, infiltration. Their very presence served to undermine trust and scare off potential supporters. The FBI and police exploited this fear to smear genuine activists as agents. Psychological warfare. They planted false media stories, they do like those, don't they, and published bogus leaflets and other publications in the name of targeted groups. Harassment via the legal system. Lawfare is what we call that today, warfare via the law, where not everybody is subject to the same treatment. Two-tier justice. The FBI and police abuse the legal system to harass dissidents and make them appear to be criminals. Officers of the law gave perjured testimony and presented fabricated evidence as a pretext for false arrests and wrongful imprisonment. They enforced tax laws and other government regulations against opponents and used conspicuous surveillance, investigative interviews, and grand jury subpoenas in an effort to intimidate activists and silence their supporters. Nothing is new, folks. The next tactic was illegal force. The FBI conspired with the local police departments to threaten dissidents, to conduct illegal break-ins in order to search dissident homes, and to commit vandalism, assaults, beatings, and assassinations. The objective, of course, was to frighten or eliminate dissidents and disrupt their movements. And the last tactic was to undermine public opinion. One of the primary ways the FBI targeted organizations was by challenging their reputations in the community and denying them a platform to gain legitimacy. Furthermore, The organisation created and controlled negative media meant to undermine Black Power organisations. For instance, they oversaw the creation of documentaries skillfully edited to paint the Black Panther Party as aggressive, and false newspaper stories that spread misinformation about party members. Luckily for us, all of this ended 50 years ago. On March the 8th of 1971, a group of activists broke into an FBI office in Pennsylvania and basically stole every document they could get their hands on. The activists then began leaking details about FBI abuses to the media. Among the documents stolen and leaked, of course, were those exposing COINTELPRO. And last but not least, on to number 1. Any guesses? Shout them out on the bus like a maniac. Quick! Of course, it's Operation Paperclip.
For more spooky strangeness, visit www.markwshako.com. And now, back to the episode.
This one's fun. That's sarcasm, by the way. As the Allies advanced into Germany in 1945 as the Second World War lurched to an end, they discovered that within all the death and misery bloomed a wealth of scientific talent. The Nazis had been working tirelessly to come up with something, anything, that would turn the almost inevitable tide of failure back in their favour. Brilliant minds had contributed to Germany's significant wartime technological advancements. Reluctant to waste such brilliance, Operation Overcast began. The US Joint Chiefs wanted to leverage the Germans' expertise in the ongoing conflict with Japan. It was also thought that their knowledge could become useful post-war. In their efforts to create the tide-turning superweapon, the Nazis had become quite skilled at rocket science, not to mention aviation, and of course, chemical and biological warfare, because they're fucking Nazis. As World War II dragged on, Germany realised that there was a rather large iceberg looming on the horizon in the shape of logistical disadvantage. Their failure to conquer the USSR had severely depleted resources and left them poorly prepared against the Red Army's westward counterstrike. Now was the time that the German government needed brains more than brawn, so in early 1943 they began recalling scientists from combat and gave them a proviso: defence. 4,000 Rocketeers were recalled from frontline combat and arrived in Peenemünde. If you're struggling to see where this is going, the next quote is from Dieter K. Hussel's book called Peenemünde to Canaveral. That's a clue. Overnight, PhDs were liberated from kitchen duty. Masters of Science were recalled from orderly service. Mathematicians were hauled out of bakeries, and precision mechanics ceased to be truck drivers. The undertaking of such a mass recall required identification of such minds. That job fell to Werner Osenberg. He was the engineer leading the Defence Research Association. He drafted a list of scientists, engineers and technicians and cleared the men for scientific work, and the Osenberg list was born. In March of 1945, a Polish lab technician discovered bits of the Osenberg list stuffed into a toilet at Bonn University. From there, the list found its way to MI6, who then passed it on to US intelligence. The chief of the Jet Propulsion Section, Robert B. Staver, used this list to compile his own list of scientists to be captured and interrogated. At the head of this list was Germany's best rocket scientist, Wernher von Braun. In 1945, von Braun and over 1,000 colleagues surrendered to the Americans. One engineer later revealed, "We despise the French. We are mortally afraid of the Soviets. We do not believe the British can afford us, so that leaves the Americans." And so, in late June of 1945, they headed west, closer to the Americans to avoid the advancing Soviet army. Concern was growing that these German minds might emigrate and continue to work in countries who were neutral during the war, or worse, work directly with an enemy. The USSR relocated well over 2,000 Nazi specialists and their families in one night in late October 1946. So, In November of the same year, Ordnance Corps officers who wanted certain scientists to work with them in the US attached a paperclip to the front of their files, and Operation Paperclip was born. Over 1,500 engineers, technicians and scientists were moved from former Nazi Germany to the US for government employment. Several were members of the Nazi Party. According to Wikipedia, the operation played a crucial role in the establishment of NASA and the success of the Apollo missions to the Moon. So here we are, folks. It only took 7 episodes and we're already at space Nazis. Do you want to hear some stories about some of the more renowned space Nazis? Let's go. Up first is Walter Schreiber. Just weeks after his arrival in the States in 1951, the Boston Globe linked Walter to human experiments carried out at a women's-only concentration camp, Ravensbrück. Schreiber was quickly tried, found guilty, and sentenced to just kidding. He emigrated to Argentina with the aid of the US military. In 1984, one of the scientists thought his connection to forced labour at Buchenwald subcamp Mittelbau-Dora meant he faced the threat of prosecution. Arthur Rudolph fled the US and headed to West Germany. Upon arrival in West Germany, Rudolph was told in no uncertain terms that he was not, well, just kidding. They granted him citizenship. Hubertus Struckhold was dubbed the father of space medicine after playing a major role in the development of innovations like the spacesuit and space life support systems. So important was he that a prestigious Struckhold Award was named after him. The award was given by the Space Medicine Association for 50 years between 1963 and 2013. When the Wall Street Journal highlighted a connection between old Hubertus and human experimentation in 2012, it was decided that the award was best retired. While justice for Struckhold was not swift, it was severe, because upon the discovery of his just kidding, he'd already been dead for 1/4 of a century. In 1961, the man often considered the jewel in the paperclip crown, and father of space travel, or the father of rocket science, or the father of the American lunar program, Wernher von Braun, was investigated for his involvement in the Nazi Party as an SS member. He was tried and executed. Just kidding. The FBI said he'd only joined the Nazi Party to avoid imprisonment, which is lucky for them because that could have been really embarrassing. In case you thought such depravity belonged only to the US and Operation Paperclip, the Soviet Union also conducted a similar program called Operation Osoviakhim. It has been valued somewhere in the region of $10 billion in patents and industrial processes came as a result of the fruits of Operation Paperclip, which reminds me of the old saying about the love of money and evil. Anyway, that's the end of our list. Grim. MKUltra, Tuskegee, Paperclip, Mockingbird and COINTELPRO. 5 conspiracy theories that turned out to be true. So, if you hear the news say conspiracy theory, and your first thought is a flat earth ruled by our lizard overlords, perhaps you'll pause and recall where the term actually came from and why it came into being in the first place. Maybe next time you hear the term conspiracy theory, you might remember one of these examples and not write the whole story off as nonsense. Maybe. That's all from me. Thanks for listening. Until next time, keep it weird. The intro music is Slasher by Carl Casey at Whitebat Audio, check out his YouTube channel. The outro music is Lone Wolf by Guillaume Bernard. Please remember to like, subscribe, rate, review and share this episode wherever you may have heard it. And you can find me on Facebook and X as Marc W. Shako. For more information on my books and all things podcasty, visit www.markwshako.com. Thanks for listening.